Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Over the last few days, we've taken a close look at some of the class changes arriving with WoW's next big update, patch 11.05, which is a patch dedicated to the WoW's 20th anniversary. Besides all of the new activities and festivities with the 20th anniversary, we also got a couple of class adjustments and additional changes, mostly improvements for a variety of different specs and playstyles, either improving on the thematics of a class or just rotational gameplay. And one of those classes getting further improved is the class of Mage, which saw a ton of attention all throughout the alpha and the beta development of the War Within expansion, with Arcane Mage currently being one of the more popular specs of DPS classes in general for the first season of War Within. I mean, the class absolutely blows most of the DPS out of the water, and they're only continuing to get better and better. So if you haven't played or leveled a Mage so far for the War Within, you should probably start getting on it because they're getting even better for the 11.05 update, and that's exactly what I want to take a look at, is all of the Mage changes arriving with this patch. As always, if you guys want to see more regular War Within updates like these, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So first things first, let's get over the basics with some of the more general adjustments. It's going to take literally 2 seconds. For mages in particular, just like all of the other classes that bring a raid buff, the raid buff of Arcane Intellect simply just sees a mana cost reduction from a 4% base mana down to 1%, just a nice little adjustment. Also, some of the other Covenant or used to be Covenant abilities that now have become talents from the expansion of Dragonflight heading into War Within, a lot of them get different icons. So Shifting Power no longer has this Night Fae aesthetic. Now it has more of this Arcane Mages type of aesthetic to it. So icon is a little different, which is kind of nice. Then we have a couple of spec changes, or rather hero spec changes, starting with Frostfire, which saw a slight adjustment in one of its little empowerment abilities. Specifically when it comes to Excess Fire, which used to be a talent that allowed Frost and Fire to gain the ability of Living Bomb and have it spread to a couple of enemies. They've actually changed it to not longer be a Living Bomb, but instead a Frostfire Burst, which simply deals Frostfire damage to nearby enemies with a soft cap of 8 targets. Frostfire Burst reduces the cooldown of Phoenix Flame, so it still has that interaction with your rotation for Fire and Frost, but no longer being a Living Bomb that you can apply as a Fire Mage, or Frost Mage rather, which I really enjoyed. It's a little bit more, I guess, basic in a way. Yeah, it looks like they broke the ability of Frostfire Bolt also, so PTR changes, little bugs here and there, that is to be expected, but yeah, whenever I'm casting Frostfire Bolt, it does nothing. It does absolutely nothing, so that's going to be something I'll need to report on. Still, either way, we can interact with the excess fire, and we are able to see what the proc of Frostfire Burst looks like, and it's a decent bit of damage. It's okay, I guess. They recently did end up buffing the damage of the Living Bomb ability over on the Live Realms by a couple of times. Those changes I don't think are on PTR just yet, however, so it's going to be interesting to see how Living Bomb actually compares against the ability of the Excess Fire. But at least take a look at the current tooltips. It does seem to be a little bit more impactful, at least in how much damage it could potentially do. But I always thought it was kind of cool for Frost Mage just to be able to get a Living Bomb that could spread to multiple targets. I always just like that mechanic, but I think the Frostfire damage is probably better, because now it becomes an ability that benefits your Frostfire Mastery a little bit more. Damaging with fire spells generates 1 stack of Fire Mastery, Frost spells generates Frost Mastery, but with the effect being Frostfire, it allows you to gain both the stacks a little bit quicker. So maybe it'll actually end up playing a little bit better in that regard with the Frostfire playstyle. Next, we got a few updates for the Spellslinger playstyle, such as a new talent in the choice over on the bottom left-hand side. Instead of just always picking Shifting Shards, which allows your shifting power to generate a barrage of arcane splinters at the target, they give you a signature spell ability, which is a little bit different depending if you're Arcane or Frost. For Arcane, it allows you to really invest into the ability of Magi Spark, which a lot of mages do, but now there's a bit more of a talent that kind of plays off of the Spellslinger specifically. Whenever Magi Spark explodes, you conjure 6 arcane splinters immediately at your target, which plays again around the splintering sorcery flurry and the splinters and how much damage they can do, and then conjured splinters also allows you to benefit from splinter storm a little bit more aggressively, and with how often you use Magi or touch the Magi specifically to get the Magi Spark combo, which you do basically as soon as you get your Magi Spark or touch the Magi on the target, you should be able to benefit from this one quite a bit. For Frost Mages, the effect for signature spell is a little bit different. It has you playing around Glacial Spike. Consuming Winter's Chill with Glacial Spike conjures 2 additional Frost Splinters, so it's more of a rotational ability that you get to utilize pretty regularly. And now there's a bit more of a talented spec tie-in to the Spellslinger that allows you to generate additional splinters. And with how often you're going to be using Glacial Spike on Winter's Chill, which is pretty much regularly or almost always, that should be able to give you a nice consistent generation of splinters as well as Splinter Storm. So it's basically like a bursty way to generate splinters or a more consistent way to generate splinters. Though with Frost technically able to cleave with Glacial Spike, it's gonna be a little bit hard to get like Winter's Chill on both 2 targets unless they can make Flurry cleave to multiple targets. But at least you should be able to generate your fairly consistent amount of splinters if maybe the encounter calls for it. Though with that being said, we can now move on into the spec of Arcane, which has gotten a flurry of new talents. So the first one of which being a brand new option found up here top right of the talent tree called Aether Vision. I actually want to come back to this talent a little bit later, however, because it's going to be replacing a very core mechanic to the spec of Arcane. It's probably one of the more exciting talents that players are anticipating for the spec of Arcane, but I do want to talk about it because of the controversial changes they're doing a little bit later for the Arcane section. Besides the new talent, which I'm really just delaying towards the tail end though, we got a couple of talent adjustments for a few talents of Arcane to make them a little bit more sought after, or potentially maybe a viable option, such as Time Loop, which doesn't really get a lot of play on Live Realms, but they updated to now also increase the duration of the Arcane Delimitation buff by 2 additional seconds. On top of it, they also increase the chance for this effect to proc by 25%. So with the effect being able to proc off of itself, 50% chance was kind of a low number, but 25% chance may potentially make it a bit more playable with delimitation if you're really investing heavily into the missiles-based gameplay and high voltage potentially in Aether Attunement. So that could be kind of good in that department specifically. Though as they're trying to make this whole missile section better, they're also trying to make the Arcane Blast section a little bit better by buffing a handful of talents such as Late Drinker, which has been updated. Late Drinker no longer affects Arcane Barrage, but only Arcane Blast. So it's a bit more of a single target cleaving component that can cause your Arcane Blast to echo, repeating its damage at 60% effectiveness to the primary target and all nearby enemies. So it has this like touch of the magic kind of a cleave focus feel to it. They increase the chance for you to be able to generate the stack of Late Drinker by 25%, and now casting Touch of the Magic guarantees you a proc of Late Drinker, so it gives you a guaranteed way to at least be able to proc this ability, which should hopefully make it maybe a little bit better. And this one is going to have a bit of a tie-in with the Aether Vision, which we'll get into in just a moment. The talent of Charge Orb doesn't get nearly as much play as it should, but they're trying to make it a little bit better by having it give not only 1 additional charge of Arcane Orb, but also increasing this damage by 15%, which can actually double back into the Spellslinger that allows you to be able to generate Arcane Orbs and increases damage further, which could potentially grant you quite a bit of additional cleave in AoE. The talent of Consortium's Bauble has been updated. It now increases the Arcane Blast damage by 8% and reduces its mana cost by 5%. They also shifted it a little bit in the talent tree position. They also fixed an issue where Arcane Delimitation, for some reason, was able to contribute twice to its damage increase, which is likely going to end up nerfing the ability. I wasn't even aware that this was a issue. I knew that there was a bunch of bugs over in the alpha and the beta, and I guess that was one of the bugs that made it into the live realms. Now, here's the controversial change. Nether Precision. They've apparently fixed it, so it no longer allows you to double dip using spell queue. Like Arcane, Nether Precision increases the damage of your Arcane Blast or Arcane Barrage by 20%. So towards the tail end for the last stack of Nether Precision, this is what you used to be able to do back in the day. Here goes a proc of Nether Precision, so you'll be able to cast a single Arcane Blast into the first stack, and then you'll be able to cast Arcane Blast into a barrage, and since both of the spells are part of the same spell queue, both of them will benefit from Nether Precision. And that was a core mechanic for Archmages for a little bit now, which was technically a bug. It was something that was apparently not intended to be a mechanic, but it was a mechanic for multiple expansions where mages started to play around with it. And playing around the mechanic rotationally was interesting and actually kind of enjoyable, and added a little bit towards the skill cap of the Arcane Mage. Back during development, I think during beta or alpha, Blizzard recognized that, yeah, it's a bug, we're gonna try to fix it, but then they decided to revert that as they listened to the feedback from the Arcane Mage community, who all said that, wait, we actually like this bug. It will like the mechanic and the rotational things that it offers, so Nether Precision was allowed to stay during that update, and now it looks like they're going back and are reverting it, so you can no longer spell queue both an Arcane Blast and a Barrage during the same stack of Nether Precision. However, this is why they added the talent of Aether Vision as a replacement for a mechanic, because Nether Precision thing was a bug, so instead of letting the bug stay, they're fixing the bug, but are adding a talent that plays around a very similar mechanic that scratches that same itch, I guess is the best way to put it. But Aether Vision could potentially open up a little bit more in terms of builds and variety, so this is exactly why I wanted to save Aether Vision for later, because it's going to be a pretty big core Arcane Mage mechanic. So with Aether Vision, consuming Nether Precision with Arcane Blast increases the damage of your next Arcane Barrage by 10% and causes it to generate 2 Arcane charges, stacking up to 2 times. So as we get ourselves a proc of the Arcane Missiles, we got ourselves Nether Precision. Arcane Blast is going to give us 1 stack of Aether Vision, and then a second one is going to give another stack. So now we have 2 stacks for Arcane Barrage, causes it to deal 20% additional damage and generate arcane charges instantly. So it has a bit more of a resource play to it, so you can now utilize Arcane Blast in order to buff up your next Arcane Barrage, which I think is kind of interesting to a degree. Now, it does mean that if you're trying to benefit from this Arcane Blasty kind of combo, or if you're trying to maximize the value of your Nether Precisions, you should be ideally using your because of Aether Vision, using Nether Precisions on your Arcane Blast. Now, that's create a bit of a conflict when it comes to your AoE rotation, and this is just something I'm kind of experimenting myself to figure it out. But let's say you get your procs of your Nether Precision. In this situation, do you just start spamming barrages because you're just trying to get the most damage out of the barrages? Or is it more valuable for you to be able to Arcane Blast twice, which doesn't do AoE damage but benefits single target and resource maximization, because you can barrage into another barrage after? You see how it changes your rotation a little bit? It grants you resources. It allows you to play around with resources, but I think it also opens up the possibility for the talents like Late Drinker to gain a bit more value. Because Late Drinker, what it does is it kind of encourages for you to use Nether Precision on your Arcane Blast, because it causes them to echo whenever you get the Late Drinker proc. And then you also can pick up Prodigy Savant, so it can increase the effectiveness of your mastery on Arcane Blast and Arcane Barrage as well. And then with the Aether Vision, you're more encouraged to spend those Nether Precisions on your Blast rather than Barrages if you're trying to create more value, because then you could just buff the damage of your Blast and Barrage and generate resources on top of it, which just feels like kind of a no-brainer combination. And they're given Late Drinker an opportunity to at least be guaranteed during Touch of the Magi. So now there's a bit more of a guarantee where you can have a bit more single target during a focus damage window. With Touch of the Magi, it's a fantastic offensive ability in my opinion that allows Arcane Mages to have a lot of focus damage on a priority high kill target, like something you have to eliminate immediately, and those targets always exist, whether it's in a raid, usually a boss, or some kind of priority ad that needs to be nuked as soon as possible, or in Mythic Plus, usually every single trash pack, every single pack of enemies, there's usually going to be one target that's like higher priority, you gotta eliminate it as soon as possible. Like if you want a specific dungeon that we're going to be playing in Mythic Plus for the season, think of like Ner'zhul in Necrotic Wake before you go over that first bridge. Like if your group has to do Ner'zhul, having the Touch of the Magi and dump all of your damage into Ner'zhul would be amazing. Or maybe the Bone Boy that's now guarding the location, guarding the spot before the second boss, you're probably going to pull him with another set of ads and just focus down the big bony I guess undead elemental thing construction monstrosity, and just focus that thing down and eliminate it as quickly as you can, because it has more health than everything else around it. So there's always an opportunity for you to be able to have that focus damage, which is highly valued in things like Mythic Plus, but also in raids, and it's just big value damage in general. So combining Touch of the Magi together with this Late Drinker that allows you single target abilities to now cleave, I feel like it gives you a much more of a cleave-y focused profile, where you have a ton of single target damage, but also free AoE damage that hits everything around your priority target. So maybe there could be some synergy in combination, but you would have to give up talents such as High Voltage, which is amazing for research generation, Nether Attunement, which I'm a big fan of, the missile cleaving, and Arcane Harmony, which kind of mimics the Shadowlands-y missile barrage interaction talents, which I really enjoyed. So you're probably gonna have to give up 3 of these talents just to pick up maybe like 1 point of Arcane Delimitation to pick up Birdie Savant, grab Layside, and Lay Drinker potentially, or Concentration on Lay Drinker. But you'll have to commit quite a few talent points to pick it up, but I'm just not quite sure. I guess I just don't really know if Arcane Mages are going to do that in the future, but it opens up an opportunity because of the way Aether Vision works, and I find that very interesting. But I kind of want to pass it off to you guys towards the comment section, really. What do you think when it comes to Arcane Mages? Would you potentially pick up Aether Vision and then pair it together with Lay Drinker? Or are you going to just pick up Aether Vision and use it primarily in single target, but then use that missile AoE combo without really dipping into Aether Vision? This change to Nether Precision is kind of interesting, and it really is going to make Arcane Mages really rethink how they approach the different encounters. And maybe I'm overthinking it at this point, but I just think it's a very interesting talent change that opens up quite a few different possibilities, and I find that aspect specifically exciting. Besides this, we also got a few adjustments for Arcane Mages in particular when it comes to the hero talent changes, like Spellslinger Arcane. They're trying to make this a little bit better, and there's some opportunity with the talents they've changed so far to make Spellslinger potentially a very powerful option. But they're making Spellstorm, they're giving it a small chance to now proc clear casting. I guess at some point in the beta it used to be able to, and then they removed it. Now they're bringing it back in, so hopefully it makes Spellslinger a little bit more competitive to Sun Fury, which has become the kind of de facto way to play Arcane Mage so far. Though even Sun Fury gets a couple of adjustments either way though, such as Glorious Incandescence, which on top of its original effect now also causes Arcane Barrage to deal 30% increased damage in addition to its previous effects, which is gonna make the ability even better than before. The Memory of Alar Capstone ability now extends. The Arcane Soul extension is now increased by 1 second instead of half a second, so it makes this capstone even stronger than before for the barrage spam gameplay. With the talent of Ignite the Future, they've adjusted it, so now it increases the maximum stacks of Mana Cascade up to 15, which Mana Cascade increases your haste, and kind of you can have multiple instances of this buff overlapping, so that can be very strong if you can get really ramped up. They've also fixed an issue where Mana Cascade was granted less haste for some reason. It was granted 0.5% haste instead of a full percent haste, so this is overall a good change that allows you to experiment with your stats and really try to see if you can keep the ramp of Mana Cascade going if you don't end up going Run Dormancy. From there on, however, we can move on to the specs such as Fire and Frost, and both of those specs didn't get nearly as many changes as Fire, as Arcane did specifically. There are a couple of nice additions for Fire, but there's one change for Frost specifically, but from this point on, the changes to the other 2 specs of mages are going to be kind of light. The first one being for Fire is Majesty of the Phoenix, which sometimes gets a bit of play. Casting Phoenix Flames causes your next Flame Strike to have its critical strike chance increased by 20% and critical strike damage increased by 20%. This effect can now stack up to 3 times, so it gives you a little bit more of this Flame Strike, Cleave, build up, big damage kind of a combo, which I think could be very powerful if you're playing into that crit based gameplay, which it really should be as a Fire Mage, since Combustion procs you or allows you guaranteed critical strike damage. Then they also fixed a couple of things for the talent of Heat Shimmer, which I was surprised that this talent was having as many issues, but apparently it could once again trigger while casting Scorch, which probably should be happening. It no longer consumes the effect if you just randomly get it while you're mid-casted Scorch, which was like, why was that a thing to begin with? And passes such as Fuel the Fire finally show up in your talent tree. It was a bug that it wasn't showing it up, and a lot of players were wondering, like, is this effect working? Is it not working? But it was not showing up in the talent tree, but it definitely was getting full value when it comes to the actual gameplay and rotation. When it comes to Sunfire or Sun Fury as a Fire Mage, it got a couple of new changes, such as Glorious Incandescence got a bonus effect. It now also causes your Fire Blast to hit 2 nearby targets in addition to its previous effects. So Fire Blast can now hit multiple enemies, which is nice. It's a bit of a cleave whenever you generate a consuming burden of power, which really procs whenever you generate a spell Fire Sphere, which procs every 6 times you consume a hot streak proc, but also can happen passively depending on the talents that you're running. But what this one does is it causes your Fire Blast to hit 2 targets. You're probably wondering, every time you press Fire Blast, you gain a immediate guaranteed crit to build up for heating up. Does that mean you're able to just in a single Fire Blast achieve Hot Streak? And yes, the answer is yes. You're able to instantly get a Hot Streak as soon as you get the ability proccing. We have no procs, we just have Glorious Incandescence, so in a single Fire Blast, immediate Hot Streak proc. So there it is. Yeah, it's very, very nice. I think it's going to be interesting rotationally. It'll probably speed up the gameplay for Fire Mage a little bit. I like that kind of little synergy, those little combinations that they've added. They've also updated Memory of Lore to be a little bit better, very similar to Arcane Mage's, how it extends the duration of the buff that it procs by 1 second instead of half a second. They're doing exactly the same thing for Hypothermia for Fire Mages as well. So it's going to give you a little bit better of a burst window whenever you do end up in your combustion with Hypothermia. We could just plow back-to-back Pyroblast or Flame Strikes into targets, so that could be potentially really, really good altogether. And finally, when it comes to Frost Mage, all they've really done is for Spell Slinger, specifically with the Splinter Storm ability. Splinter Storm no longer applies Winter's Chill to the target. Instead, Splinter Storm now has a 5% chance to grant you Brain Freeze, and that's really about it. That's about all we saw with the spec of Frost Mage, which so far hasn't really been doing that bad when it comes to the generalized gameplay of Frost. But I do wonder what you guys would want to see out of the spec of Frost going forward, because Arcane is obviously getting a couple of new additions, even Fire is getting a handful of changes, plus all the new stuff that's going to be arriving for them Tuesday, which by the time you're watching this video already has happened, with them buffing the back up by quite a bit. But what would you want to see for the spec of Frost? Because out of all the 3 specs of mages, it seems like this one is getting probably the least amount of them. And Frost, for the most part, has been able to retain just about the same energy it's had for the last couple of expansions. So I feel like if any spec were to get any major changes or anything, anything to add a little bit more, spice up the rotation or add a few more nuanced things, I imagine the spec of Frost will probably be the one to get any kind of massive reworks in the future. But I want to pass it on to you. What would you want to see for the spec of Frost in the future? Let me know that in the comments down below. But with that being said, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this update, and I hope all of you enjoyed. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate that. Also, join our Discord community to discuss with the rest of the community about all of these upcoming, mostly Arcane changes. Also, let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.